Anxiety is invisible, but it is not harmless. It does not bleed or break bones, so people treat it like it is not real, until it slowly steals their sleep, their appetite, their focus, their ability to love without suspicion. And the darkest part is this: most people think anxiety is caused by what happens to them. The truth is uglier. Anxiety is caused by how they grip what happens, and how tightly they clutch the idea that things must go a certain way. Welcome back to The Hidden Self. Today we're going to talk about anxiety with surgical precision, using an ancient philosophy that most modern people misunderstand on purpose. We'll use Zhuang and the Boatman story to expose something you've probably been avoiding. Anxiety is not primarily an external weather system. It is an internal control addiction. You call it fear, you call it stress, you call it just being realistic. But psychologically, it behaves like panic in slow motion. Zhuang wrote about a boat that could be controlled by a man whose mind stayed calm. The student Yan Hui was amazed. He watched the boatman move as if the water were not a threat but an instrument. The boatman climbed, steered, corrected, smooth and rhythmic. It looked effortless, like the boat was alive and listening to him. Yan Hui couldn't stand the question burning in his chest, so he asked something arrogant in the most human way possible. He asked if he could learn that mysterious skill. The boatman answered in a way that sounds simple until you realize it's a psychological diagnosis. He said if someone is good at swimming, they can learn quickly. If someone is good at diving, even if they've never seen the boat before, once they step onto it, they can master it fast. Yan Hui was confused. How does skill with water translate into boat control? Why does the person who has never been on a boat struggle, while the person who has faced the ocean's danger can move with confidence? And then Confucius explains the part people skip. He says the difference is not the boat, it's the fear response. The good swimmer is not destroyed by the possibility of flipping. Even if the boat overturns, they don't melt into panic. They can swim back, turn it around, continue learning. Their mind doesn't collapse under uncertainty. They can stay functional while the body is exposed to risk. The good diver goes even deeper. If the boat sinks, they can remain under the water long enough to find a way out. Their mind doesn't scramble. The survival instinct is trained, not panicked. They are not mentally fighting the ocean while trying to act. So the mind stays clear. Clear mind produces skill. Skill looks like mystical talent, but it's actually emotional regulation. That's the first truth you need to absorb. Anxiety is not a reaction to danger. It is a reaction to what your mind demands must not happen. It's a reaction to your internal contract with reality. You're not really afraid of the storm. You're afraid of losing control of the narrative you built around the storm. And that's why anxiety feels like it comes from outside. Because the outside gives you evidence for your fear. Someone might reject you. Someone might leave. You might fail the exam. You might get fired. You might lose money. Your bank account might flicker like a dying candle. So your mind does what minds do. It proves itself right. It takes the external event and uses it as a weapon to keep you clenched. It says, see, look what happened. Now you're allowed to be scared. But Zhuang doesn't let you keep that comfort. He says the real source is internal clinging. Specifically, clinging to outcomes, status, and possession. Not clinging to the water itself, but clinging to the meaning you attach to what might happen in that water. This is where the boat story connects to the second story Zhuang uses. And it is brutally relevant in 2026, when everyone is gambling with their attention and their identity every day. Zhuang tells of a gambler who plays with bricks instead of gold or silver. When the stake is bricks, he feels calm. His moves become clean. His decisions look natural. He can even win, because his mind isn't fighting for survival inside a psychological cage. But when the stake becomes gold, his entire body changes. His hands start to fumble. His eyes become restless. His thoughts slither into doubt. He becomes the kind of person who overthinks the obvious, and he loses. Now, pay attention to what Zhuang is actually saying. He is not saying the game changed. The game's rules didn't transform. What changed is the weight of meaning placed on the outcome. Your mind doesn't break because you stepped into a harder environment. Your mind breaks because you attached your safety, your worth, your future, and your identity to a specific result. This is why anxiety is so corrosive. It turns normal moments into trials of identity. You don't just think, I might fail. You think, if I fail, I am nothing. You don't just fear rejection. You fear that rejection will rewrite your entire self-story. You fear it because you've decided the other person's response is a verdict on your value. So you become a hostage, not to the other person, not to the job market, not to the test, not to the waves. You become a hostage to the idea that you must guarantee outcomes to be safe. And when you can't guarantee outcomes, your mind panics and calls it being careful. Let me tell you what this looks like in real life, not in philosophy books. Think about the student who studies for weeks, but on exam day, they can't remember what they learned. They're not blank because the brain is broken. They are blank because anxiety hijacked their retrieval. The mind becomes busy scanning for danger. What if I fail? What if I disappoint? What if I wasted my time? What if my family sees this as proof that I'm stupid? Their attention is not on the exam. It's on the imaginary catastrophe of social meaning. Now think about the employee who can do the job, but freezes during presentations. They know the data, they prepared slides. But the moment they stand in front of people, their thoughts turn into a courtroom. Their mind begins interrogating them. Will they like you? Will you sound intelligent? Will you look incompetent? Their body tightens, their voice becomes thin, their breath becomes shallow. They make mistakes, not because the work is impossible, but because they are trying to control how they will be perceived. That's not work pressure. That's anxious clinging. The clinging is to being evaluated as acceptable. The clinging is to avoiding shame. The clinging is to escaping the feeling that if you are judged, you will die socially. And if you think that only happens in professional life, you're lying to yourself. Relationships are anxiety laboratories. The more someone loves, the more they fear losing. And the more they fear losing, the more they attempt to hold on. They start monitoring. They start checking. They start asking for reassurance, as if reassurance could substitute for trust. They begin reading silence like it is evidence of betrayal. They begin interpreting delays like they are proof of rejection. They keep their partner under emotional surveillance, and they call it caring. But here is the paradox Zhuang would spit on. The more you fear losing the other person, the more you sabotage the very closeness you want. Anxiety makes you controlling. Control makes the other person suffocate, and suffocation produces distance. So your fear feeds the machine that makes your fear true. Anxiety isn't only a symptom, it's a strategy. A strategy for avoiding pain that creates more pain. This is why people end up in loops. They don't break because they can't handle uncertainty. They cling to the idea that the relationship must remain stable and predictable. They demand constant proof that the bond is safe. And if the bond doesn't provide perfect proof, their nervous system screams. So they do what humans always do when they feel unsafe. They build rituals, they write rules, they invent tests. They demand explanations for every delay, every neutral tone, every day when the other person doesn't seem as responsive. Then they get angry when the other person can't meet the anxiety standards. They accuse, they punish with coldness, they start turning love into management. And the hidden self part of this is what nobody wants to admit. Anxiety often isn't about the other person. It's about the anxious person's inability to tolerate their own inner emptiness. They feel that if the relationship wobbles, they will collapse. They feel that their identity depends on being chosen consistently. So they try to force stability externally, because internal stability feels unavailable. But Zhuang's philosophy hits the nerve. The real problem is the weight you place on the outcome. If you remove the weight, your mind stops tearing itself apart. If you reduce the meaning of being lost, you gain movement. Let's make this painfully practical. Anxiety thrives when you assign moral value to outcomes. When you treat a result like a character judgment. When you treat uncertainty as danger. When you treat could happen as if it has already happened in your body. When you keep rehearsing worst-case scenarios as if rehearsal prevents disaster. The modern version of Zhuang's phantom boat is the endless mental simulation. You run scenarios before anything occurs. You watch yourself in your head. You imagine rejection. You imagine embarrassment. You imagine financial collapse. You imagine your loved one leaving. And then you react as if it is happening now. You haven't just predicted. You have relived. And reliving turns into exhaustion. Exhaustion turns into irritability. Irritability turns into avoidance. Avoidance turns into less experience. Less experience makes you feel less capable. That's the loop. Anxiety doesn't stay in the mind. It reorganizes behavior until your life starts shrinking to match your fears. That's why anxiety feels like a cage, not because the world is cruel, but because your responses keep narrowing the map. You take fewer risks, you speak less honestly, you apply to fewer opportunities, you delay decisions, you wait for certainty, but certainty is not something life offers. Life offers movement, waves, and unpredictability. So you wait, and waiting becomes a slow death of possibility. Now we reach the third truth. The one that threatens the identity of anyone who profits from anxiety. The hidden self trick is this. Many people treat anxiety as proof of seriousness. They say, if I worry, it means I care. They say, if I'm anxious, it means I'm responsible. They say, I need to prepare because I might mess up. Listen carefully. Anxiety feels productive. It feels like preparation, but often it's just control disguised as effort. Anxious people can study for hours and still feel unready. They can plan an entire year and still wake up terrified. They can read manuals, watch tutorials, perfect their resumes, and still feel like one mistake will expose them as unworthy, because the real issue is not preparation. The issue is that they've confused safety with control. Preparation is about action. Anxiety is about mental fixation. Preparation reduces uncertainty through doing. Anxiety increases uncertainty by constantly returning to the worst possibility without any meaningful action. Preparation is forward. Anxiety is looping. And Zhuangzi offers a way out that sounds almost offensive in its simplicity. Stop trying to dominate reality and start learning to float inside uncertainty. In modern terms, it means you train your nervous system to tolerate non-resolution. It means you practice being okay without needing guarantees. It means you shift your attention from the outcome to the process, because the outcome is the part you can't control and the process is the part you can embody. So when you're studying, you study like someone who will learn, not like someone who must prove worth. When you're working, you work like someone building skill, not like someone avoiding humiliation. When you're in love, you love like the bond is alive, not like it's a contract you must enforce. This is not positive thinking. It's emotional economics. You're changing where you spend your mental energy. Imagine two people doing the same job. Person one thinks, I hope I impress them. I hope I don't fail. I need them to respect me. Person two thinks, I will do the work well and improve what I can. Both can be hardworking, but person one is carrying an invisible bag of weight labeled outcome, and that weight changes everything. Person two carries only the tool bag labeled process. Zhuang's Boatman is the second person. He isn't fearless because he's stupid. He's fearless because the meaning of failure is not lethal. His mind doesn't interpret danger as identity death. Therefore, his attention stays present. Present attention is the enemy of anxiety. The fourth truth is about what Zhuangzi calls an empty mind, like an empty boat. This is where people misunderstand and get offended, because they think empty mind means numbness. It doesn't. It doesn't mean you don't care. It means you don't pack your mind with demands that force it to break. An empty boat can move through waves without anger. The boat isn't angry at water. It isn't bargaining with the ocean. It's just traveling. So your mind needs that emptiness. Not emptiness as absence of emotion. Emptiness as space where emotions can pass without controlling the steering wheel. It means criticism doesn't become identity collapse. It means sudden trouble doesn't become spiritual apocalypse. You can feel the hit, but you don't fuse with it. This is what makes your mind runnable. Anxiety makes you rigid. Emptiness makes you flexible. Here's a micro story. Someone sends you a message that sounds cold. You immediately interpret it. Your mind manufactures the entire movie. They're mad. They don't care. You ruined everything. Your heart speeds up. Your hands start shaking. You want to respond instantly, to repair the threat. You send a defensive paragraph. Now you've made the fear into action. But consider the alternative. You let the message be just a message. You notice your nervous system rising. You breathe and you wait long enough for